So hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is launching a brand internationally, and it's a part one. So we're going to start a webinar series, and I've got Buzz Beauty here with me today that will be joining me. So we're going to look at how you can launch a brand internationally, have some global expansion with your beauty brand, and what the steps are really that you need to be looking for. So we're going to have a bit of a different format today. I'll be doing kind of an interview with Denise and Jess, who I'll introduce properly very shortly. And we'll have some kind of top tips through presentation as well. There's going to be the opportunity to ask some questions towards the end. So feel very free as we go through this to use the live chats if you want to share any experiences and discuss them, but also to use the Q&A box for any questions that you have. And we'll be really happy to answer those as we come towards the end. Today's webinar is being recorded, so don't worry if you need to dip out or if you'd like to share the webinar with any of your colleagues or friends, you're very welcome to do that, and I'll be sending that out alongside all of our contact information at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Buzz Beauty's directors, founders, everything, Denise and Jess. And I'd love you two guys just to say some things about yourselves. So Denise, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. My name is Denise Dente, and we started Buzz Beauty about 3 years ago, and it's been a very exciting time. My background is that I have been in the beauty business for over 25 years, crossing over from hair care, skincare, makeup, and nails, working for many of the largest beauty brands from Sebastian, Wella, Lanza, Matrix, then into skincare and hair care with Dalvin Austin Comfort Zone. And then most recently was the general manager for an international division of Revlon, managing over 100 countries, distributors, direct business, and so forth. So it's been an exciting adventure. I love the international business. I've been in it for a very long time, and worked all over the world and had the privilege of traveling and just love the beauty industry. So it's quite exciting to be able to help now owner founders or large companies really expand their global footprint.
Thanks, Denise. And Jess, it'd be great if you could say some words about yourself as well.
Absolutely. I'm Jessica Quick, and I started in this industry at Dermalogica. So really got my my bearings from an entrepreneur standpoint and all the way through into acquisition. Came over and joined Denise at Revlon. So I was in charge of the international marketing piece of that, running with Denise those countries, as well as what do we say, it was over 90 plus countries. So had a lot of really great experiences working abroad and really working with brands trying to go abroad and come into the United States. I finished my MBA as well. I wanted to apply some of that academia and theory into this. And so I was able to do that while working in this industry and built great networks and connections. And it's really been an amazing experience of reaching out to the world and offering beauty products and how we can go about making them available in all these different markets. So that has been, it's been super rewarding and exciting, always full of challenges, but with that, a lot of experiences, a lot of great relationships that have been built. And so really proud of that. When Denise and I linked up at Revlon, we were there for, almost a decade, and really kept looking at each other saying, there's so much knowledge, there's so much experience. How do we take this to more people that really need it? And so we then stepped away and founded Buzz Beauty with the intention of taking all of those networks, relationships, experiences, and bringing them just to more people, to be able to work with more people, developing their brands and taking them international.
That's amazing. And it's going to be so exciting to share just a tidbit of what you guys do as well today, and explain, just in a bit more detail, and get some more feedback. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm the Regulatory and Sales Director at Ayton Global Research. So we specifically focus on product testing for things like claim substantiation in particular. So we'll be touching on some of that today as well, because obviously a big part of international expansion is testing your products to make sure they work with your consumers, and also making sure they're regulatory compliant with your advertising as well. So we'll go into a bit more detail on that. But just to get started with you guys in terms of interview, I really want to talk a bit about Whip Fire Money, which is your book. So that's really how we got in contact, because obviously you've put together this book, which is about your experiences. And as I said, we'll be sharing some top tips today that have come directly from it. But I'd love to know what actually inspired you to write the book.
So this book has been a labor of love over literally a decade. When Denise and I traveled around the world, we were constantly on airplanes, hotels, airport lobbies, taxis, trains, and we kept talking about how could we get all this information into one spot. And then we also would have people, as we spoke with them, say, you have so much information, you should write a book. You should write a book. And so it almost became a little bit of a back and forth with Denise and I about, oh, this will go in chapter 2. Oh, this should go in the section about regulatory. And that really was kind of the catalyst. And then as we founded Buzz Beauty, we really then looked at it and said, if there's ever an opportunity to take the time and write a book, it's now. And we really felt the need to be able to put all of our information into one spot where anybody can pick it up and at least have the foundation. And so we came at this book, Whip Fire Money, from a perspective of that busy beauty executive who's looking to find the answer to the question quickly, get to understand some basic pieces, and then keep moving. So the book is written, in fact, not to be read from cover to cover. You can, but we've specifically wrote it in chapters so that you can go to the exact section that you need. And then most of that section is written as an FAQ. And we did most of the commonly asked questions that we've gotten over the last 30 years. We put them in there. You can flip to your section, find that question you have, get your answer, and keep moving. So it's really meant to help just facilitate quick answers, get you what you need. And then, of course, along the way, we had to put in our stories, our experiences. We use things like red flags or best practices to even highlight little moments and little nuggets that you can take away and really kind of make it fun, because international business is fun. It is fun to work with different markets and to experience different cultures. So we wanted to get that into the book as well.
That's so nice. Oh, sorry.
And the name Whip Fire Money, we get asked that question a lot. How did you come up with the name Whip Fire Money? And really, those are the three tools. Those are the three most important tools that you will need to run your international business. Whip Fire Money. And we go into detail in the book about what we mean by that. We're not literally meaning a whip, although we are literally meaning money. But we go through each of the chapters and we say, hey, in this section, you may find the fire tool to be the best tool. And if that doesn't work, try money or try whip. So we give people those three pieces to come back to. So it's called Whip Fire Money, an international guidebook for beauty brands looking to go global.
Amazing.
Yeah, we love the idea of the analogy, right? Whip being that tenacity, that analogy of you just got to keep going, you've got to keep driving, keep pushing, tenacity, and then fire, of course, the incentive and building those relationships and creating a reason why people are going to help you build your brand. And like Denise said, money, that one's straight literal. Sometimes it just takes money to solve it or to get to the next step. So Whip Fire Money.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love is that you said it is fun. And I love that really came across when I was reading about your experiences and everything like that, because, you know, for everyone that's watching today, it could be really intimidating to go, I'm going to launch into a new market, or I want to go into global expansion. And it's really important to remember, well, why do you want to do that? Most of the time it's because it's good fun. You get to experience something new and it's really exciting. And I think that's such an important message to take away. If it's not fun, maybe you're doing something wrong. Maybe you need some advice, because it really should be. Obviously, everything comes with its own stress, but overall, it should be something that you get joy from. Absolutely. But in terms of, like, I know that people again today will have their own kind of reasons for why they're talking about it, but I'd love to know, what are the most common kind of turning points you see for brands when they go, okay, now I want to launch internationally or kind of go a bit more global?
Yeah, some of the turning points for people really come from a point of, I've gotten to a place in my home country where I'm ready to expand internationally, whatever that may mean. If you're in the UK, you may be ready to go to either neighboring countries, or you may be ready to come to the US or some other English speaking market. If you're a US brand, you may start exploring, should I go into Canada? Because that's kind of a natural flow of things. It usually comes from a place of, I have reached a level of success in my home country, and I've got a defined audience. I know who my audience is. I'm very competent in the resources and tools that I have in place, and I'm prepared to go international. And that may mean one country, or that may mean 10 countries, but they've started to at least contemplate, all right, I'm ready. What do I have? What are the tools and resources I have? What can I expect? And then they start exploring. So it's, the turning point usually comes from a point of success in your home country.
Amazing. And it's quite nicely said there. It's about knowing who your consumer is. I think that's actually a really good point, because it's really hard to imagine going to a new country without knowing exactly who your consumer is here. And that might change. And actually, that kind of leads me into my next question, which would be, what is the most common aspect that you think people don't consider before launching internationally? And I think that's probably a really good point before I let you answer, is to think about, what is your consumer? Because if you haven't nailed that, you might not have much success internationally. But I'd love to know other aspects that you guys have experienced as well.
Yeah, we definitely find that one of the things that sometimes brands will step over or forget is the strategy. So what does the next 18 to 24 months look like for international, for your company? And, does that look like you just need to open and get product out there, and so you're driving revenue, and therefore your strategy of what you want to do needs to be outlined. It needs to have a plan. And then it may actually be that you've had a fair amount of success in your home market. Customers, people are coming to you asking to open up your brand in their market. So it's a bit opportunistic. And so having that sit down, that moment where you stop and literally sit down and say, what is going to be the strategy for international? And put a defined timeline around it, because it doesn't need to be the next 10 years. It really can just be the next 18 to 24 months. This is what we want from it. And then you can go about deciding, yes, we'll open those countries that are coming to us, or we want to go about it this way. And it will really start to define how you're going to do international, how you're going to invest in it. But I feel like the strategy piece sometimes gets missed in the beginning.
Yeah, it's a bit of a leap before you look, as opposed to look before you leap. And I think I have an example. We, about 2 years ago or so, got called in to an existing brand that was having very good success here in the US, both professional and direct to consumer. They had expanded very opportunistically into markets internationally. And they had some new leadership that came into place that wanted to level set and really have another set of eyes come in and do an analysis on the business and really understand internationally, where are we at? What countries are we in? Do we have, the right partners? Are we in the right channels? Do we have the right resources to support those partners? What can we expect for growth? And that was a really great moment to level set that particular large organization and really help both the brand and, in their case, the direct to consumer business and the distributors that they had internationally. And so setting that up was both fun, entertaining, as well as very meaningful for them to get that strategy set, even though they were already underway in a big way.
Yeah, and as you, oh, sorry, I'll let you carry on, Jess, if you're going to say something.
No, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too, Karis.
No, I was going to say it's something I can actually really relate to. I know we're not a beauty company, but absolutely we have a very similar kind of thing where we're, a global research company. The amount of times that we get all these requests, to test in countries we haven't done before, and you have to go, whoa, step back. How have we got a strategy about this? Because you can't just send products out willy-nilly. We have to have, compliance and regulation, our top for us in particular, as I'm sure they are for you. It's really, you can get overexcited and they go, actually, are we allowed to test there? What are the regulations, the claims? It's something really, really important that, kind of gets skipped if you're not too cautious.
And
that's
sometimes
our number two.
Sometimes what we've seen is that brands will actually start shipping product, and because they'll get an order from a consumer, they'll get an order from a small distributor, they'll ship a package and it goes through. And they think, okay, no problem. There's nothing else I need to do. My shipment went through. And sometimes that initial success can actually be problematic because of that, where just because it shipped in once or twice or 3 times doesn't necessarily mean that you can get it in on a regular basis. If you haven't done the homework and the compliance, which I think is probably what Jess was going to talk about next, which was the number 2 piece.
Yeah, it is exactly that. The number 2 piece is the regulatory and the compliance piece. So after strategy, the next big thing is exactly what your group does, Karis, because of the fact that it is different in every market. You really do need to understand if your products can be sold there, can be used the way that you've intended, your packaging and the way that you speak about it, the marketing claims, all of that is allowed. And in today's day, it is a little bit easy with direct to consumer to just put the package in the mail. And we have seen that. And we have come in to clients and even larger brands, quite surprisingly, that said, look, we've been shipping into this market for quite some time. And Denise and I's eyes get really big and we say, okay, we need to step back and really figure out what we're going to do here, because there needs to be some changes to the product. It isn't actually compliant. And so some of those pieces, definitely, it just seems easy if it works in the US or even in the UK that it could work everywhere. And that's not true.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's always exactly the step that we get to is people start selling products to places and then they go, okay, we'll do a product test there. And obviously we ask for all of this information about the product to be able to send it there, and they don't have it. And it's like, well, we really this is really important that you've done the product test, because if you were going to keep sending it, you would always get caught up at the end, and it can have really bad repercussions. Like you said, if you get caught, it could be a massive tax issue or customs, and we don't want to have that at all. And actually this takes us on really nicely to the kind of next question as well, to say about what regulations, what's a good starting point for looking at those regulations. I know certainly from our point, cosmetic regulation is obviously going to be the main thing for cosmetics. Sounds really obvious, but there are differences. I think we're quite lucky being based UK /EU, still the same at the moment, with those kinds of regulations that exist, because a lot of other countries have really taken theirs from us. Or it's kind of very much of the same ilk. So anything that's needed in terms of safety testing, most ingredients are quite similar in terms of what's allowed. It's more likely to find that an ingredient that's allowed somewhere else isn't allowed in the EU than vice versa. And especially, again, when it comes to the claims testing, the kind of regulations that are in place to make sure, well, there is evidence behind the claims and what kind of evidence is allowed for each claim is really, really similar. So really, it's actually from our side, it's always the opposite way around, where a lot of US companies either don't have claims on their product because they go, oh, I can't be bothered with the hassle of it. Well, that's crazy, because there are so many beauty products out there that have claims all over them. So to think that your brand is going to stand out on its own without any kind of explanation of the benefits is a huge gamble. So I probably wouldn't recommend that. Or they kind of go, well, we've been able to say it in the US and we've got away with it, but that doesn't mean you can in the EU. And that's all to do with the registration process is slightly different in terms of that scrutiny. Don't get me wrong, there's still companies over here that have come to us and gone, oh, I've been selling this product, I didn't realize I had to have this evidence behind the claims. And it's like, it's okay, we can sort it out. But certainly, US brands coming to the EU, UK, definitely don't have quite the same education, I guess, on what the cosmetic claim criteria is in the EU. And then on the other side of that, in terms of any country, it's always advertising regulation that affects us as well. So again, they're using the UK as an example. the Advertising Standards Authority over here states you have to have evidence behind every single claim you say about your product, whether it's direct or implied, which again, people don't realize, because the thing is you cannot have any claims on your product, but if it's saying, or giving the implication that it's going to have a certain effect, that's still a claim. You need to have some kind of evidence. So that's really, really clear over here. And obviously it's a bit different because over here it's a self-regulatory organization. So it's something that's dealt with on a complaints basis. Whereas again, over in the States, that's probably the stricter side, where you've got the FTC and you get these massive like class action lawsuits, which happen against brands because they might have a kind of a claim that's not, you know, not very evidence-based, or misleading is the word that I was looking for. And then you have people sue them over it, which really you don't want either. So from my side, it's always the cosmetic regulation and the advertising regulation are going to be the things that will have slight differences from country to country. So that's what we're looking to be compliant with. And I don't know if you guys have got other ones to add to that.
I actually have one more, and I think this one is commonly overlooked, which is the rights to your assets. So a lot of times when we do photography and we use models, or we use photographers or videographers, brands, in our experience, have not received global rights, or they've only received rights, and you have to read the fine print of those contracts as to what rights you have to use that image or the likeness of that image in other markets. And so we've run into problems where we did a great, beautiful campaign, did not get the right to the model. Denise is probably laughing because she knows what I'm talking about. And then the model showed up in other countries, and absolutely you get lawsuits. So when you talk about compliancy, it's definitely cosmetics, ingredients, formulas, packaging, your marketing claims, advertising claims. And then the last piece we always ask is check your assets, or make sure whatever you choose to put on your website in another country or want to use as marketing materials, you own the rights to that image to use it in that market specifically.
That is a really interesting example. And like I said, for me personally, because I did not put beauty brand, I've never thought of that actually.
Yeah.
We do offer things like before and after photos, but literally because of GDPR, really luckily, we obviously ask if they can use it where they want, you know, everything like that. From the volunteers, but we've never really thought about it in that sense. We ask it, like I said, because it's a data protection issue. They can't use it at all if we don't get that confirmation. So yeah, that's a really interesting regulation that I've not come across before, and that's really, I'm sure people up in the audience go the same as me, like, really? Wow.
Well, I think what it is oftentimes is it's not a problem until it becomes one, meaning if it's a model and in 6 months from now, she gets picked up by a major agency, or gets hit real hard with a campaign like that goes global, then all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, we've got a model that at the time that we booked her was not globally recognized, did not have a licensing deal. It wasn't a problem, no big deal. And then it's 6 months, 9 months, a year later that he or she gets some big deal. So this is where we use the term start with the end in mind, which is make assumptions that your product line is going to be enormously successful, and it's going to draw the eyes, ears, and attention of everyone. And when it does that, a lot of things start to apply. People look at your packaging closer, they look at your claims closer, they look at your advertising closer. So none of it's a problem when you're small, or it may not be a big problem when you're small and tiny and under the radar, but none of us want to stay that way.
Yeah.
So start with the end in mind.
I love that as a tip, because again, that's really what I say to my clients when they kind of go, you know, can we get away with only asking sort of 30 people for feedback? And it's like, well, why bother doing it? Well, I said, start with the end in mind. That's a really good catchphrase, because if you're going to do advertising somewhere, that's not going to be accepted. You'll just have to do the test again. And it's actually going to cost more money in the end of the day. So yeah, I love that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to share the presentation again, because I want to go through, here we go. over here. This is kind of the quick tips that come from your book as well. So it's the Are You Ready checklist, which is from basically what we're saying, are you ready to start expanding? So just to kind of run through the points, we want to know if your product and packaging are compliant with regulatory requirements, as we've mentioned. So not just the product itself, like you said, the formula, the ingredients, also the packaging, that can change from country to country. And it's really important to be aware of that. Again, an example from that we faced kind of with Brexit in mind. Now people have to have the kind of EU and UK responsible person on their packaging, depending where they're selling. And there's also translation implications for labels. So if people are selling in lots of different European countries, they have to get it translated into every single ingredient, in every single language. So yeah, little things like that can get overlooked so often. Another important thing is to make sure you have the capital to invest and that it's earmarked for international expansion. Of course, that's important. You'd be able to afford it. You need to know what's your COGs. I haven't got this down.
Cost of goods. Yeah.
Cost of goods by product. Of course, again, so we're looking at the cost there. You need to have some brand assets, and again, making sure they're compliant as well. You need to know how to ship your product internationally. Of course, don't just start shipping it to your consumer. We've covered. Have to have access to a lawyer. That's really important, as you say. Don't kind of just start guessing. Again, in our own experience, things like terms and conditions, that changes for different countries that we operate in. It's really important to make sure it's looked over by a lawyer. And you need to make sure you're willing to learn more about the customs and the cultures. Cultures is a huge one. We've had really interesting experiences with things like India customs, sending everything correctly, but having interns ride down on their bike, going to pick up products to test from customs so they can pay them at customs. It's something that is a different culture. It's a different sort of community, and it's really important to be willing to change your kind of ways about it as well. And yeah, always stay connected with economic and political issues. Again, it's always been a thing for us in terms of testing. I remember, a couple of years ago, we had studies going in Hong Kong. We had the massive protest there. We were like, right, we have to move countries. This isn't going to work, and kind of predicted it before we started making sure that, all the products were out there and we can get the responses. So I think they're amazing top tips as well. So stop share again. I kind of want to move on to our next section of the interview. So really thinking about now what the next kind of step is, and a really good one is to go, well, okay, we want to go international expansion, but what markets should you expand into? How do you decide that?
Go ahead, Denise. I know you've got a good answer for this one, Denise.
Yeah, so the easy answer that you'll hear from many people is start in the country that is most like your home country, or start in the country where you have achieved the most success, and where the audience is. That's the easy answer. I think that then we take a deeper look at it, and when we kind of come in and do more of an analysis, what we really look for is this high opportunity. So we look at what is the size of the opportunity in a market and what are the barriers. And we almost put it on an X and Y axis where we can say, okay, the opportunity in this market is high for my specific product, and the barriers for me to get there, language, compliance, legal and regulatory, all of those things are lower. That's magic. Those things then change. But what we also see is when we say size of the opportunity, people go to a population and they'll say something like India or China or some of the others that obviously have big population. Population and opportunity for your specific product may be different. And so don't just get bedazzled by the bodies. Really, we take a look at your specific product and the audience, and where is that audience at, and then those barriers.
Absolutely. To jump in with that, it is about, we do the analysis, and I think that's a big part of this is you do start with the data. And you can obviously, there's great companies out there where you can get data, and that's important. You can, sit and really do some research online. And then ideally too, talking to people that are on the ground, either they they're in that country, or they have a primary resource in that country that can get you real life information. Because to understand, like Denise said, what's like, how many are there, and the size of the prize. And then really making a list and saying, okay, these are our primary markets that we would go into first. And maybe it's because they are, if you're coming from an English speaking market, and they're also English speaking. So it makes it very low barriers to entry. And they have a nice opportunity in the base of customers that you're looking at. But then you kind of go down another layer, right? And you say, okay, but what other markets are going to matter to me because of potentially something like protection? How do I protect my brand? How do I make sure that my brand isn't going to get counterfeited or taken over, or somebody might be coming in? And so you may make a side list that says some of these other markets are important because I want to make sure I'm registered in that market, or I own the domain in that market, just to prevent anybody from taking it, even if I haven't opened it yet. So we like to really do the research and analysis, working closely with companies that get us that information, and then making that list of who are we opening primary, because low barrier to entry, large opportunities. And then what is that list that looks like that we want to make sure we just own our IP in to protect. And that might be a little bit of resources outlaid, even without revenue being generated, to protect us. So when we are ready to go, we've got a foundation, or to protect us, we don't have to go in and do some type of litigation because somebody's taken our trademark or a design patent or something like that.
That's so interesting. And like I said, it's not necessarily about even trading there. It's just going, right, let's protect this brand, because they said it's so important. If you get counterfeited, that's it. Your reputation could be really tarnished, especially in those countries. If you ever did want to launch there, they go, oh no, that's a terrible product. It didn't work. And you really don't want that.
Yeah, and all that effort you've done to build your brand, someone's come in and eaten your lunch, even if it's not say counterfeit, let's say it's just straight competitive, and maybe it's a competitor that's local, and they looked at your things, and maybe they were like, great, I can do something similar, and not really infringe, but it's still competition, and now they're eating your lunch. And that's where we also look at and say, what markets matter to protect, and then what can we really start to drive revenue with? And international is it's a layering thing. You keep kind of going and building your layers as you go, based on your strategy.
And we really think of it like a playbook. So you have offensive and defensive. So that's one of the things that we turn over to brands is, okay, what is the offensive moves that we are making, and the strategies and the plan? And then what are the defensive things that we're doing to protect the brand, protect the territory, protect ourselves, to be able to have a truly global brand. And going back to one of your questions about one of the most overlooked things, that protection of even just domain names. Yeah. That has been one of the big ones. You would be surprised how many very, very large brands or medium-sized brands have not done some of the initial work. They intended to expand internationally, but didn't go in and take up those names. So then it becomes very fragmented. And that's always a challenge. So that, again, if you intend when you start your business to be big and be global, go and get some of those things done early, even if it's a little too early.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, you read about things like that, people getting stung because they've gone to buy a domain and someone's holding it hostage. It's just not fair, but it happens, absolutely. And it's something really does get overlooked. We've kind of touched on this question. I was going to ask about how many markets you should reach and should it be a country at a time, but I actually think that's really covered that kind of that answer as well, in terms of you need to think about that from the get-go. If you want to expand, that's all about that part of it. So I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, but I really think that has been covered in terms of making sure that's all part of your first list.
Yeah, I think we have covered it fairly well. And I think that what we've learned over the years with international is once you start momentum, you want to keep the momentum going. So it is multiple, you're usually going after multiple countries at a time, or, fielding in multiple leads at a time, because it does take so sometimes it can be a long process. Sometimes, from the moment you decide, look, I am ready to go into English speaking markets, that'll be my strategy, and these are markets I want to go and protect, then it will take some time to get all of that going. And so you have multiple countries at a time you're constantly talking with and vetting and setting up because of that. And they won't all launch at the same time, but you'll be in progress with a lot. And what we have found is that momentum matters, especially with international. Word spreads, people get excited, and you start to build on it. You don't really want to stop that. If you stop that, you have to restart it. It's so much more energy. So get moving, keep that going, and really keep going into as many markets as you can get, at least getting that pipe filled with opportunities, what you're looking at, building even that strategy specific to that market if you need to, because you're not quite ready to launch there. You're still doing the work up front to get ready.
And again, you've kind of touched on this as part of that, but as well as thinking about what markets to go into, is there any point where you go, this is the kind of markets that we should absolutely avoid? And how do you make that kind of decision as well?
So we really go back to that same question of size of the opportunity and barriers. And sometimes you make those decisions based on, boy, the size of the opportunity isn't very large, and or this is going to be very expensive and or costly for me to go into those. So it depends on the stage that you're at. If you're already underway and you have international going, you may be ready to tackle the more difficult markets. If you're just starting out, going into the ones that have the larger opportunities with lower barriers, and or even just maximizing the current markets that you're already in. In some cases, you may already be in a country, but you haven't fully exploited the opportunity yet. And so potentially before picking up and going into another country, it may be worth going deeper into the ones that you already have. So it's really continuing to come back to that plan that you've done from the beginning, your primary, your tertiary, or your primary, your secondary, and your tertiary markets, which can always change, and then size of opportunity and barriers.
We look at as well that market or that partnership having firsthand knowledge of it. If you don't have firsthand knowledge of that market right now, it's better to just pump the brakes on it. So firsthand knowledge could be, you know it because you've been to it, you've walked around it, you've seen it, you have a good feeling, or you understand it, or you know, or working with somebody that's on the ground themselves, has their contact. So you're getting real live information. A lot of times, blindly, even if you have good data from internet or companies, firsthand information will always be that next piece that's really important. And if you don't have access to that, let's say you're looking at Brazil because it makes total sense on paper, your product will do amazing there, and then you realize, I don't actually know enough about Brazil personally, or I don't have somebody there that can tell me right there on the ground about Brazil, we would say step back for now. Wait until you really get that firsthand information and knowledge, because you don't know. And sometimes data can be lacking, or there's stuff happening in the country that isn't all the way come to light yet. And so if you're not aware, that can sometimes be detrimental. We had a situation where we were going into an Eastern European country, and literally politics changed abruptly. And thankfully we had a bit of a, this is probably going to happen. This is probably going to happen. And we stopped. So we didn't make that investment. We didn't go through with having some key resources of the company being put out when that launch wasn't going to happen. So like Denise was saying, definitely making sure that you have all of the information and the data and so forth, the market size and the low barriers, but then also, do you have someone on the ground that can tell you about it? And do you have firsthand information?
Yeah, that's such a good point, as you said, like, especially when it comes to political things, unless you're there, like, because if you're looking at a country, you're looking at what you're being given, instead of looking at the opportunity to go, okay, I know that hair care products have taken off in Brazil, it's a huge thing. You don't actually have any feedback because you're typing that in,
Yeah.
So it's a really good point. And yeah, something that I definitely miss is getting on the ground in countries to find it out for myself. So hopefully travel will be back on the cards soon.
We would love anyone to go themselves directly. We realize it's not always possible. And in some of the kind of more secondary or tertiary markets, it might not be the right thing for you as the as the general manager, as the president, the owner, but definitely you can find resources of people that are there that can give you honest feedback. So yeah, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call people and find that resource. But if you can, get there yourself, always the first best option. And it's fun.
Exactly, definitely. I kind of touched on this earlier, but I would actually love to get your guys' feedback from it as well. And it's kind of saying, so I kind of said about, people go to launch with claims and they go, oh, well, it's too difficult because they're regulated differently. And is there any point that you kind of thought, if, it is quite tricky to look at the different regulations for claims. Is there ever a reason that you would say to people not to include claims, or, what's your kind of feedback on that?
Jess, this is definitely up your alley.
Yeah, look, what we will typically say is it's market specific, right? So our best thing is we all want to have global packaging. It's not realistic. It just isn't. And so definitely having the ability to remove those claims that aren't going to be compliant is important. Take them off, but potentially even do an overlabel or a sticker or something. I know it's not the most beautiful thing, but it can be done really well today, where you can still have the packaging for the rest of the world that gets your claims in there. But in this case, if you're not able to have those claims that you need, you're not able to soften them enough to be compliant or do enough work to sell the product, because I do agree with you, Karis, you do want to sell the product and you do want to mark out what's different, what's its unique selling point. Why should a consumer pick you up off the shelf? If for whatever reason you can't do that in that country, then take it off. And hopefully, ideally, in today's global world, the communication is so easily accessible because of social platforms and websites and so forth, that some of those people will find that information, even if it's not on the package. But yeah, if it's not compliant, we do remove it, but we definitely want to look at that market and see how we can continue to sell there.
I also think that it's important to not just assume that your verbiage isn't a claim. We definitely have worked with brands that they thought it was marketing copy. Oh, that's just marketing copy. That's just fluff. Because what they think is a claim is something to the effect of, 32% more hydration. They understand that that's a claim, but some of these softer claims, we have actually had a situation where working with a brand, asked if they were compliant and so forth. Yeah. No problem. Claims fine. No problem. We only have marketing copy on our packaging. Come to find out, the marketing package, even the free of statements, things that seem like soft claims are actual claims in other countries. So don't just assume that it's some percentage that's a claim. That you need to have a professional really look at your packaging, look at your formula, look at your copywriting, because in the beginning, if you make small tweaks, you can still put the gist of what you're talking about or the point of difference for your product, but it'll be a claim that is more substantiated or that can be sold in a broader group of countries.
That's a really good point. I mean, that's a lot of what I do is kind of the consultancy side, claims consultancy. We have so many brands that do that and they go, we've been called out because we've got claims, we didn't realize it. So that's where we really help, because we'll just take someone's marketing copy and go, right, that's a claim, that's a claim, that's a claim, and then we get it substantiated. So it's something that we can really work with as well. It's not this kind of, and that's it. Like I said, people don't realize that. I said, if a consumer is reading it and they think they're going to get this effect from the product, whether it's said as a measurement or whether it's implied or whether it's just kind of mentioned, it's a claim. It needs to have some kind of evidence behind it. And it's incredibly easy most of the time to get this evidence. This is what we do. And as I said, we really focus on the consumer testing, the perception, and that tends to be that marketing jargon more likely, because you're saying, I feel this, I see this. So it's not like you have to do these crazy expensive clinical instrumental studies. It's really not. It's really a case of just sending things for people to test at home and getting their feedback on it as well. And then, if you do want to make those stronger claims, we can help with that as well. One thing we try to do is really make sure that the research we provide is globally compliant. So if people want to say a claim that we don't think is going to either reflect their key markets or be unlikely to be accepted everywhere, we'll change the wording, or we'll look at saying something else that we know, no matter what market they're going to go to, it'll be fine. Obviously, I'm talking about perception claims. You just mentioned free from as well. That's a minefield, because especially, I know we've had this conversation in the States. Everybody loves to say free from. It's the favorite claim of the moment. Anything that says it doesn't include something is what people like. Whereas the EU or UK, they're so tight on those now, because you're not saying what your product does do, you're just saying what it doesn't have in it. And in doing that, you're really making your competition look bad. Paraben free, well, there's only so much information about parabens being bad, and the EU and UK have decided that they're not bad at all. So if you say paraben free, you're making every paraben product look so much worse than yours. So that's a really, really good example in terms of, that's where a stick on label I think would be brilliant to kind of do those ingredient claims, because you're not really saying about the benefits or anything. They can be used anywhere. But those really particular, kind of ingredient claims or free from claims, maybe look at where that will stand out and help you, and where it really won't, and be able to make those decisions as well. And I kind of want to go into saying about how you'll be really confident that your product will be purchased in a territory. And I kind of want to carry on from what I was saying about product testing. That's another huge reason we do what we do, because it's not just about those claims and saying they're compliant. It's actually going, do people like the product? It's a huge thing people overlook when they go, okay, we want to get some claims kind of tested and get some evidence about them. And I go, well, where are your key territories? Because that's where we should test. And they go, well, we're selling over here, but we just want to keep it in the US. And it's like, well, if you're selling in China, that's a completely different culture. It's a completely different skin type. And in many cases, a different ambient temperature your product's going to be sat at. So you're going to have no feedback on your product when you go to launch it there whatsoever. And we had it recently with a really popular British beauty brand that's incredibly successful over here, one of those really prestigious brands. And we tested their product in China, and it was a cleansing balm, which over here, everyone knows how to use a cleansing balm. You just rub it on, hot towel, rub it off, that kind of thing. But they didn't have the usage directions as clear as that in Chinese, but we provided. So a lot of the feedback was like, I don't really get what it's supposed to do. Like, I've kind of followed it, but what am I supposed to experience from this? Because they just didn't have that bigger picture of using that kind of product that we were really used to. So the feedback wasn't that great. And obviously, you don't want people to get bad feedback, but it was like, well, this is perfect in a way, because before you've launched there, you can really look at what you're saying about the product, what benefits it's supposed to be giving you, how you're supposed to use it, and why you're using it, because otherwise nobody's going to purchase it. So product testing in specific territories is incredibly important for us. And I always say, if you're going global, you haven't got to test in every single country. That would be crazy. You just wouldn't have the budget for it. But if you say, like a lot of people will say, we know we want to go to Southeast Asia, we know we want to go to the USA, we know we want to do Europe, we can select certain countries and say what's going to be a realistic coverage for those products, and get that feedback overall. But I would love to know from you guys as well as the product testing side, what do you think can give people confidence that their product's actually going to perform well in the countries they want to sell it in?
For me, one of the things that we do is a competitive analysis. So if you have like product or similar product, whether it's a category or an actual product, to your point, like a cleansing balm, something like that, or you have a particular ingredient or a particular point of view or a particular category of product, taking a look at the competitive set and how they are doing in that market. If you're first to enter and there is no competitors in your space at all, most definitely sending some product, doing all of those testing in advance to see if that audience that you think is there is really there, and getting them to do exactly what you said. Read the packaging. Is it clear? Because to your point, things that may be standard or normal in your market may not necessarily translate into other markets. but that competitive analysis piece is a big one.
Yeah,
Perfect.
we actually had intimate experience with this. Denise and I were both at the company that launched the gel polish, the original gel polish, before it was ever anything. So it was the same. How do we start to think about how this would perform in other markets? And really even from a standpoint of how much do we even make? Because, is it going to be a hit? Is it not going to be a hit? And so that, getting out there and getting samples to people and getting actual feedback on the ground, that firsthand knowledge we continue to reiterate is important. And also it helps define what before you even come in, it'll help you define, like you were mentioning, Karis, how you want to go through the marketing, because what you thought your USP was and what the brand stands for is maybe one of the lines, but now maybe you need to add a couple more things because it wasn't as clear, or in that market, that culture is already so adapted that thing that it's not a big deal. So how do you make it a little bit more special? Or they know nothing about it. And so how do you make it a little bit more understandable in ways that their culture would use this? And so even all those little pieces we can localize, we can keep all the tenets of the brand, but we can localize a little bit better, and then therefore have more success. And it necessarily isn't a giant change in anything. It's just, hey, if we added a couple more of these usage points, or we added a little bit more of the storytelling around this, then people would understand it, and there we would have a better chance of success. So we love being able to look at individual important markets or regions and really understanding how to localize it a little bit to make it as successful as possible.
Amazing. I'm aware our hour is ticking by really quickly, so I'm going to breeze through the tips, the checklist from this round, and I'm going to ask you guys one more question before going to our audience for questions as well, because I'm sure that people are going to be burning with questions. So just to kind of give you the summary from that kind of section about choosing a market, it's obviously really important to make sure you've gathered the necessary data and information. As we said, use the resources that are available, but also get on the ground and get people on the ground there. Make sure you've compared the information against the markets that you're most successful in. So make sure that success is being carried forward as well. You need to make sure you have considered the opportunities as well as the obstacles, and also create a list of the first markets you want to move into as well. So as I said, I'm sorry to rush through the last bit, but I really want to ask you just one more question before we go to the audience. And it's really about, we talked about strategy and things like that. And obviously a really important thing about that is knowing your business model. So I'd love to know, what is a good starting point that you think that companies need to start at when they're deciding what business model that their company should do?
Really starting to understand, what is your expectation? What do you expect? We have worked with brands where it's been a very opportunistic move to go international, and it's somebody that's come to them at a trade show and said, "Oh, I'd love to sell your product in Italy." And other times it's more strategic, where, look, we want to grow our international market and we want it to be 40% of our total business. And we're going to put a lot of resources and money and time behind it because we want it to be multiple millions of dollars. So some of it starts with my resources that I have to support it, and what do I want it to contribute to my total business? Is it just an additional amount of money that anything I can get from international is just plus to what I'm currently doing in my home market? Or, you know what, I'm going to really make a run at this internationally, and I expect it to deliver a meaningful amount to my bottom line. Once you know what your expectation is and what your resources are, then figuring out, do I want to go through distributors, which then presents maybe a more positive cash flow situation for you because you're selling the product, delivering it, and getting paid? Or are you looking at setting up a subsidiary or a joint venture, which is then going to cost you more money, take a little bit more time, but you will then have maybe more control? So everything from revenue expectations, resources, cash flow needs to be taken into consideration. Those are the things that will help you determine how you want to set up your international structure. And then Jess, I know you may have a couple more things.
Yeah, my one call out too is it doesn't have to be the same across the whole area either. So in markets, you can have different business models. You may have a distributor in the Middle East and maybe the Gulf countries. You decide to have a distributor there, but you may have specific markets where you're actually operating an office there, and it makes sense because you can build the product there also. Or you've got, some great ability to have some key employees there that were necessary. So you may have a subsidiary in that market and a distributor in another. You may go direct in some markets with distributors also. One thing that's really interesting that we love about the beauty industry is that you have all these different channels and opportunities. So it doesn't have to be a one size across the whole area. You can take it bit by bit. And even when you start in a market, you may say, look, we're going to start in this market. It's opportunistic. They came to us at a trade show in Italy and they are really strong in retail. So we're going to give them the retail channel and we're going to let them go as a distributor. And in the meantime, you may say, look, but we're going to start our own D2C and we're going to run D2C. And then we also may be looking for another partner for our professional side of our business. We're going to service the salons and the spas. So there can be 3 or 4 different options, even in one country. Obviously, something like the US is so large. A lot of brands coming into the US, they do look at the US as we're going to need a home base there. And so it may take a little more time, but the opportunity is so big that it warrants it. So like Denise said, defining that strategy, looking at it for your primary and secondary markets, and then diving into what makes the most sense based on your resources and capabilities to execute that for the business model that will return what your strategy has set out, what you want from that market.
It's like an open-mindedness, not just kind of going, this is what works there, we're going to do that everywhere. It's really important to be versatile, I guess, and make sure that you're amending to what's going to work in each territory. So just to summarize,
flexibility.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just to quickly summarize then, and then I'm going to head to the audience questions. So always make sure you've considered the options and selected the business structure. I've got my camera in the way. Business structure that best aligns with your company goals. So of course, that's what we've kind of mentioned on there. Make sure you lay out the different scenarios and obviously the costs that are associated with each one, because some countries may have better cost opportunities than others. Be really thoughtful and consider your own bandwidth and risk sensitivity. So what can you actually achieve as well? And make sure you've got a rough plan together of the costs, about switching the model if you need to as well. So sorry to really rush through that last section. I'm sure next time we do a webinar, I'll have much more to carry forward from that as well. But I do want to give the chance for the audience to ask any questions that you might have burning. I think we've had one in already, so I'm just going to have a little look. So yes, Breeze asked, so in that analysis of the global expansion, so this was towards the beginning and saying, what were the key drivers to justify keeping a market open or to investing more into a specific market? What are the kind of key drivers in terms of deciding which ones we're going to keep open and which ones we're going to invest in specifically? We might have touched on it already, but we'll give it a go.
I think it starts with what is that size of the opportunity and doing that deep dive into who is the audience, what is their spending pattern, how easy are they to get to? Have we fully tapped it out? Have we fully tried everything to get to it? And that analysis really does that of, all right, what is the size of the opportunity? What have we done so far? What is our competitive set doing? And are we looking at protecting our market share or growing our market share? And then what tools and resources do I have to do that? Yes, then the decision of, have I exhausted all of those efforts, and or is the size of the opportunity so small that I should exit? And there are times to exit a market, whether it's either permanent or temporary. Sometimes you need to take a step back and reset. Maybe the assets and resources that you have right now are not resonating in that market, or the product has fallen out of favor. Maybe the market is oversaturated with the competitive set and you're just not selling as much as you used to. That may be a time to take a step back and retrench.
And it's having that confidence as well to go, yeah, let's restart again. And really, at the end of the day, don't be scared about kind of how to make that decision. This is why we have experts like yourselves. Ask for advice. It's always really important. Ask the people. If you're not sure, am I going down a rabbit hole here? Should I take a step back and reset? There's always resources to ask. I can't see any more questions coming in, and I realize we've come to the end of our hour. That has just flown by, and I'm so excited to be able to share more with everyone. So yeah, we'll definitely be giving out some information about when we'll next be having a webinar together, because I think we've just barely scratched the surface. There's always so much to talk about. Just to wrap up, before we go, I've got 2 more webinars coming up this month. So next week, I have one with Connect for Compliance, where we'll be looking at treated articles, specifically looking at things like antibacterial materials, and looking at the consumer insights, the regulatory considerations there. And then on the 23rd of July, I'll be having a webinar about clothing and apparel testing in particular, to test on another subject as well. There is our contact information, but as I mentioned, I will be sending out our contact information alongside the webinar recording. So if you do have any burning questions that haven't been answered today, please feel free to get in touch. Thank you so much, Denise and Jess. I've so appreciated having all of your expertise today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we loved it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Can't wait to have you again. And thank you to our lovely audience for attending today. And we'll be in touch very shortly with the follow-up. Hope everyone has an amazing weekend.
Thank you.